a good finish to kind of seal them in. And I didn't want a lot of gloss on it. So that's what the finish was.
Well,
okay, going back to this Twilight Zone idea here, I really was going to ask if anybody had turned beech, because my neighbor cut down a big beech tree and he's got wood laying around. I'm going to ask him about it. But I really like the transition inside the lid. I like that form. That's a very nice piece to me.
No, thanks. It was a lot of hollowing, obviously.
John, what did you do with the yellow band, the texture on there? Maybe you said it, but I missed it.
yeah, it looks like orange peel.
It looks like orange peel, exactly.
That's
No,
lemon
that
peel.
was
That is lemon peel.
it was just a micromotor tool with a little round bit on it, and
Okay.
you make a bunch of figure eights or S's in it, and then just draw a few lines through the S's, and it creates kind of an interesting texture.
Yeah, I like it.
And then the black lines that are kind of the borders of that were burned in with just a hot wire on the lathe.
Mhm. Nice.
Gentlemen,
And then my daughter is, she truly is a really good artist. And so I sent her about 10 pieces that we're going to do collaborations on. And I also bought her a wood burner, so she can do some wood burning herself.
Yeah,
And
great. That's great.
We'll see how that comes out.
Yeah.
Nice.
I love this piece. Gentlemen, I wound up with quite a bit of American beech, and it's marvelous wood to work with. Thoroughly have enjoyed it.
Yeah,
No.
this was all dry. The wood was all dry, so it was quite a bit of hollowing, quite a bit of turning. But I really like the wood. The European beech was nice. I actually picked it up. I took a class with Nick Cook a while ago, and we were using some European beech in the class, and then I bought a few extra pieces when I left, and that's where this came from. And then the coloring and the burning and everything hides the seams because it was 3 pieces that were laminated together.
Just a quick comment on photos, John. I want to apologize, John, and we've got a couple of guys who do great photography, and they do these massive gallery images. Knowing that many of us are on small screens, I crop pretty vigorously on the stuff that comes in, because as woodturners, we want to see the piece. If it were in a gallery, you'd have this beautiful ocean of background that you could just walk up to and see. So please forgive some of my tighter crops, but I think it works better on the screen.
I think it's fine. It's a good crop.
All right, let's move on. Mark.
Okay, hey, so this is a cherry vase. This was a piece of wood that was given to me by my little brother in Michigan. I'm not exactly sure which side of ground level most of this is on. I thought it was mostly root. The last time I talked to him, this was right above ground, but anyway, right at the same location. It hadn't been stored properly. I mean, he didn't know what to do with it and wanted to gift it to me. So it had been sitting around for a little while before I got him to wrap it up. And anyway, so it took about a year to get to me, and then it was kind of cracked. And so it actually just laid around my shop for a good while. And I stubbed my toe on it enough times to say, okay, let's try to see if we can do anything with this. So this is what I came up with. I think it was an interesting turning project. Yes, you can see on the back side, whichever that is on that bottom left corner, if that was facing up or facing down, I mean, that looks like a root to me, I suppose. But anyway, the hollowing was really interesting because of all the different densities of wood and the extreme cracking that I had. So and I'm not that good at hollowing. I'm just not I don't have a lot of experience at it. So I had a Trent Bosch stabilizer that I was using, and really found that just wouldn't work at all. Conceptually it's great, but with the different densities, it just ended up just bouncing around way too much and just doing a lot of chattering, which I was pretty sure was going to just blow it up. But then I found by using the same tools, which is one of Trent Bosch's hollowers, and use it freehand, just getting the longest handle I could on it, made quite a bit of difference, because just that little bit of feathering you can do just by rotating it the slightest little bit, depending upon where you're at, just to rotate 3 or 4 degrees clockwise or counterclockwise really made a difference in how it would cut. I didn't take a picture of the bottom of it, but it's a standard, just a little dimple where just to make sure that it doesn't roll around. And I made a jam chuck to allow me to finish the bottom, since obviously a vacuum chuck wouldn't work on it. So that worked out just fine. It was just a long piece of scrap that I used that I could put in a chuck, would push against the bottom of the vase and push it against my tailstock. And then it was turned from the right, it was turned so that it kept the top of the vase from moving around at all. So I didn't get any bouncing, because it was seeming pretty fragile at that point. I didn't sand the inside. That was just way over the top, and I didn't really see enough reason to do it. But to give the inside some interest, I dyed it all red, and you can see some of it through the cracks there.
That's what I was going to ask.
I think the effect is good. Yeah.
I would have liked to have seen a photo of the inside.
I want to, I'll send you one. One of the last comment I want to make about this is having to do with gravity. And I've seen this before, and I know there's some general guidelines, like make the widest part of the vase, a third from the bottom or a third from the top. I tend to not like to measure things as much. I like to train my eye. And what I'm noticing is there's a real difference, when something is on the lathe and it's situated horizontally, the balance and the proportions can look great. And then as soon as you stand it up on its bottom, gravity takes hold. And, it seems to me like the widest part is too close to the bottom. Anyway, so that's just a note.
Yeah, Mark, I think you got working against you. It looks like there's a void in there, right? At the bottom left on this picture.
Oh,
so that, that's going to work against you when you try to, when you place it down, because, it changes the proportion. Nothing you can do about it. But I mean, I wouldn't, it looks to be fairly well balanced if you look at the right side.
Are you saying that it pulls your eye, that void?
Well, it almost looks asymmetrical.
I see. You just.
If you look at the right side, it tends to flow. And to me, looking at the left side, and it's hard to look at a picture because you got shadows in there too. So, but no,
right,
I think that again, that's the piece. It adds some interest to the piece, but I think it kind of fools your eye there, because
it makes you think the bottom is coming in much faster than it really is.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Yeah. Well, that could be.
But the shape.
And if I'd taken a picture at a lower angle, then it actually looks a little more balanced if you're looking at it straight on and not downward a little bit.
Yeah. I think there's so much character in it that the shape doesn't bother me at all. I'm really looking at the character of the wood. It's a really nice piece to me.
How do you dye the inside without it getting on the outside?
So if that worked really fine, I tested it out and found it with just a foam brush. You can just daub the dye on. And I found there was really no problem with having more dye in one section than another. It's just You put the dye in, it turned it red. If you put more dye in, it was just the same red. And so it really didn't bleed through the cracks at all. It just stayed right there on the surface. So that was a lot easier than I thought it would be.
You live right. Yeah.
And so I was, so I acquired some maple logs last week, and they're not big enough to do, well, they're of a good size that natural edge seemed to be the way to go. I tend to not pay enough attention to exactly what's going to be where on the log. Well, then that's not completely true. I saw this one had a rotted stub branch coming out of it. And I just decided that, well, let's just see what happens there. So you can clearly see the hole through there, and that appendage on the right side there is also part of the outer part of that stub, and then another little branch sticking out the top side on this view.
How many times did you come too close to knocking one of those two off? Those extensions.
Yeah.
It started out with 8 branches.
No, that all worked fine. And I'm really kind of enjoying learning to do this better and, do it without knocking the bark off and not hitting things harder than they need to be to get the cut.
It's just hard to remember that when you position everything, that there's these 2 little spots that extend 2 more inches than everything else.
Oh, right. Like when you're putting your tool rest there and then turn the lathe on.
Yep.
Right. That one. Yeah.
Did you end up
Anyway.
sealing the bark with CA?
No. That was, I cut that green, and it, very green. I had to put it in paper bags overnight so that it would get dry enough to sand it. And then it just has walnut oil on it. And it seems to be doing fine.
Very
So
nice.
was the tree just cut?
Yes.
Yeah.
I got the logs like 2 or 3 days after the tree came down. So it was very, very fresh.
Yeah, I just got some wood recently, and the bark really stays on. This is the right time of year, I think, to have the wood hold on.
Right. That's my understanding. And yeah, so any of this that I've been able to get, I've been turning it doing the mad dash to get as much of it roughed in, and or these things just to get as much turn while I still have the fresh logs.
Really nice.
Well done.
Thank you.
This is more technical than I generally like to do. But there were, among all the wood we got from Mike Smith, there were a few pre-cut dry cherry rounds. And I just looked at them and said, these were probably prepared to, they were 3 different sizes. Someone probably thought they were going to make a 3-tiered stand. I always wanted to try one of those. So I they were so thick, I actually got 2 sets out of them because I cut them down with a thin parting tool. And my main thing is making something like that. The first thing that happens is it's very pretty. Now, what the heck do I do with it when I'm not using it? Because they're bare to store. So I want to make it knock down. So I just got some thread rod and some thread inserts and went through the trouble of making sure it was dead on straight with a jig and went at it. It was kind of fun. I did it over a couple days. It wasn't too monotonous because the pieces were so small, they were fairly easy to do. The main trick to it was getting those inserts glued in early, fitted early, and using a jig to make sure they were square with the face every time. Once you solve that, the rest became rather easy.
Norm, can you tell us a little about that jig to get things squared up?
So I just took a waste block that fits in my chuck, and I drilled and I fed one of the threaded rods in. And it was so tight that I actually had to hammer the thread rod in. I could turn it a couple times, then I hammered it in. Made sure it was dead straight, put a little CA glue, sunk it enough so that I could put a washer and put a little CA glue on against the washer so that as I twisted things on and off, I wouldn't screw it out of the wood. But it just gave me a flat plane with the screw coming out of it. Then everything else was screwed and mounted as I went along. It's funny because my first try on the big piece, I was thinking I was going to use my oh god, what do you call it? Not the vacuum chuck, but the what's the name? The chuck with the spirals.
Coal jaws?
Not coal
Oh,
jaws.
the Longworth truck.
Thank you.
Oh, the
Thank you.
Longworth.
I have a Longworth that I bought years ago, and I'm setting it all up and I'm ready to go, and then I suddenly realized that my Longworth has a button in the middle that sits about 3/8 inch proud, and that was not going to work with those flat planes, so I had to pull out the vacuum chuck.
Norm, you put these studs in the in those, whatever you call the vertical pieces. So
Yep.
how are they? So are the discs threaded? Do they have nut inserts put into them, or
See if I can
does
get
it go all the way through? And those.
This is a 10 mil insert. Matches the threads. Make sense?
Why did you do it that way instead of having the threaded rod go through the disc and into the next?
Because I wanted it to be completely break. I didn't want this long piece of rod. I wanted to be able to make this whole package able to fit in a decent sized box. So having a 20-inch threaded rod was not really going to help along those ways.
No, I was thinking that you would have had a nut bottom of each of those vertical pieces and a threaded rod in the top. Do you follow me?
Not
To
quite.
have like 1 inch of threaded rod that would go through one layer and into the next.
Oh, yes, yes. It was just going to be easier to turn the pieces by not having the thread rod sticking out of the flat plane. Yeah, I mean, one or the other had to have the thread sticking out, and it just made more sense to me for breakdown and saving that it was easier to put the thread rod into the verticals and ensure that that long strip would definitely straighten itself out as I drilled in. Because the thread rod is about this long, the inserts are only about that long.
So the vertical pieces have threads on each end?
It's a through. It's a through. No, yes, I'm sorry.
Oh.
Yes, yes. The vertical pieces
Yeah,
have threads
okay.
on each end,
Okay.
except the top one. Let's see if I can get that to show. Both ends.
That would actually allow you to have a 1 or 2 or 3 tier version. Right?
Exactly right. The bases were an add-on. I made them without the bases, and I kept putting them down saying, it looks like they want some elevation on it. So I added the bases to them afterwards, and I realized that, yeah, you can do it without the base. You can do it as only a 2-tier. You can do it however you want. Preston was asking me about it, and I said, I felt like I was trying to be a little bit of Jim Duxbury when I did this one. Nowhere near his masterful technological ability, but
I don't get it.
Same thing. So another one of those pieces of wood. This is just a small cake stand, just a 2-piecer. But same notion of it. It'd be nice if you could break this thing down and store it and carry it much more easily. And again, that one also works on its own without the head. It'll sit on the table just fine, sitting up about 1.5 inches. This cherry was very dry and the glue ups were done. So that was one of the benefits. Is I don't think I'd want to try this with wet wood. I may, but if it moves and it's no longer a flat plane, I think it destroys the whole effect. None of these have finished yet.
How about the captured ring, Norm? Do you have a tool for that, or how would you do that?
I have a tool for it, but as I think we discussed last time, the funny thing about the tool is that you only use it at the last minute.
Yeah,
It's a ring freeing tool. It's not a ring making tool.
Right.
Which is kind of whenever I do a
one out of
like
an
that, I
Allen
try
wrench,
for one.
but I'm not that happy with it. So
So whenever I find myself on a piece of wood where I'm making a deep cove like that, even if I don't want it, I go through the effort of making a captive ring because it's good practice. And if they fail or fall apart, who cares?
Yeah.
All going to be waste wood anyway.
Yeah. And all you lose is the ring.
So yeah, I've got to put finish on those. Any recommendations for that, Sherry? Good finish? Wow, quiet group.
How about orange peel?
You try lacquer, but watch out for orange peel.
Yeah. Lemon peel is very attractive also.
This is a tough orange peel crowd.
Good afternoon. Good evening, everyone. This is a big piece of cedar. And I don't remember, I've had it for a while in my shop. I just actually sitting in my mechanical room. And I didn't know if it was going to keep cracking or not, but it stayed together pretty well. In the foreground here is a sort of a swirly blue epoxy. And in the back, I realized it's a darker black epoxy. And there's a lot of checks and cracks in it. And I was thinking about trying to core it, but I'm scared of cedar since it's such a soft wood. And the difference between the epoxy and the cedar, any recommendations there?
The one time I tried coring with cedar, it ripped the tenon right out. Because just what you say, it's a tricky wood for that kind of stress.
Okay. I think it's going to be pretty. It's got a lot of swirly grain in it that you can't really see. You can see there's a lot of torn grain there on the left side in this picture. This is just rough turned right.
Yeah, Preston, I've tried coring cedar too, and it's maybe because you have that acrylic embedded in there, it might be act a little different. I don't know, but I find it's the softer wood, the blade tends to grab, and then if you come along, it goes a little too deep, and you get essentially a catch, or if you hit like a knot, which you normally do in cedar,
Right.
it's all over.
Okay.
So it depends on how much you like this big bowl. You have to waste out the whole inside of it or take the risk of losing the whole thing.
Think of how nice the shavings will smell.
Yeah.
Right.
What epoxy did you use, Preston?
The comment I would make, insects won't eat cedar. There's a reason. When I work with cedar, I go to extremes on dust protection for me and the shop. That stuff's deadly.
Yeah.
I had the same experience, coughed for about 2 or 3 weeks after making some cedar stuff from a neighbor's log. Be real careful.
Okay, thank you.
One last thing, I was doing some big cedar platters years ago, and I found the best thing in the world was to keep a water spray bottle handy. Because when the wood just wouldn't cut properly, if you wet it, it magically changed for a while. You have to keep wetting it, but it works.
Yeah.
A very good point. And don't put poly on that cedar. The tannins in the wood will absolutely kill the cure. Use lacquer.
Okay. What about orange peel? I mean,
I like oranges.
So there's a question about the epoxy, and as Alumalite, I don't remember the name of the coloring I put in. It was like a mica powder.
Did you use the clear slow?
No, this was done a couple years ago. Well, I mean, like a year and a half ago before I knew about that stuff.
Gotcha. Looks pretty.
So you can see the duct tape that was my form. So
Hey, it worked. It's
Preston?
gonna be a good looking piece.
yeah, thank you.
Also, if you do lacquer this, I have found that lacquer over time, the oil in the cedar will cause gatoring in the lacquer. So if you do a wipe the cedar down with denatured alcohol right before you start lacquering it, that will prevent that from happening later on in the future.
Okay. Well, thank you. Well,
Core, and it's not quite done, but you can core acrylic and wood pieces. But it does get grabby. You need to be really careful with it, or it'll. And I'll show those pieces next. So I took three cores out of a bowl about this size. It actually had a little bit more resin in it than this one, but it does get the difference between the way it cuts on the wood and then the resin is you just have to sharpen those tips. I sharpened it twice in the course of one core in order to get it to keep cutting, but it does get grabby. It's also an advantage of the one-way system with that chisel cut on it it cuts better than the blunt on some of the other coring systems. That point on the one-way will help you out there. So anyway, but just I'll show you next month.
okay, thank you, Steve. Okay, this is a small box I'm making. It's just rough turn, and I was trying to sand it. There's a lot of epoxy in this, and so it's long to where it's gotten shiny yet, or clearish, but it's a some epoxy that I won on the Instagram raffle. But I think it's going to be real pretty. This is cherry and sort of purplish, bluish purple swirly epoxy.
If you seal so when you get it almost when it's finished turning, but before you start, or you can sand it down to about 400 with dry sanding, but you're going to want to wet sand the epoxy. So what I do is I pull it off. I put a couple of coats of Seal-A-Cell on there to get the wood sealed. So when you go to wet sanding, you don't all that water doesn't get into your wood and discolor it. So and I find that works very well. And then the nice thing about Seal-A-Cells, when you go to sand the piece, the Seal-A-Cell, you'll just sand it off the resin.
Okay.
But if you don't do that, when you go to wet sanding, it can really make your wood kind of funky.
You might want to also include a pin or some kind of locating thing to put the lid in the right position so it matches up with the vase.
I remember your article about that. Yes.
That's what I'm suggesting. Thank you.
Yep.
All right, Richard, are you here? I didn't see. I can't see all the attendees here. Is Richard on? Are you muted? Can one of you? I can't see that everyone that's on because when I'm sharing my screen, I lose the.
I'm looking right now.
Didn't see him.
Yeah, Richard's on, but
Yeah,
just a second.
he's muted and got his camera off.
Richard Cook? What Richard? I've asked him to unmute.
All right, well.
Must have stepped away.
All right, we'll move on. Bob.
Yeah, I'm still playing around with these Vance pods, and I was curious. The first pieces I did, I made goblets, and I put them on the lathe, basically center to center. And I said, wonder what happens if I turn this thing horizontally and turn it. And I was surprised I got kind of an interesting shape out of it. But what really surprised me on the next slide was the inside and the design that I got on the inside of this thing, and it was just I thought kind of really cool the way that came out. So
I love it. I've got 3 of these sitting in my shop right now, and I wasn't sure what to do with them.
That's
put your
that
face
is-
put your face shield on before you start.
And plenty of dust collection because you hit this layer of this red fuzzy stuff that just goes everywhere.
Somebody said that can give you your skin irritation too. I didn't experience that. I was in my shop when it was cold, so I was pretty well covered up. But I'd be careful with that fuzzy stuff.
I don't know about skin irritation, but if you blow that red stuff everywhere, it'll sure give you wife irritation.
Good to know, Jeff.
That's nice. That's nice. And that's nice shape on your base there.
Yeah, thanks.
I think actually, the one thing I looked at this, and it's just, I'm not sure that it might actually sit better right to my view without, and again, it's so hard just looking at these things in pictures, but
that is something I had to try to work with, because what happened is you can't see it, but on the underneath there, the center portion where I needed to put the hole had the edge of one of those Vance seed openings, and the drill kept slipping off. I tried to do it by hand, so I had to kind of futz around to get that thing in there, and it did not seat right. So
okay, all right.
Good eyes.
All right, nicely done. No, I've never seen one turn sideways like that. That's very interesting.
Yeah, that just kind of fascinated me. I was just really surprised with it.
Be interesting to try to stabilize one of those with cactus juice. If you ever want to try that sometime, let me know. Bring it over. We'll stick it in the vacuum chamber, and because I think it would solidify all this stuff. It might be interesting to try.
Yeah, it's amazing how hard these things are. I mean, when I'm doing it, I use like a 3/8 inch bowl gouge. I've got, or more of a detail gouge, and man, I sharpened that thing probably 2 or 3 times doing this.
Right. Huh.
Bob, one thing on the stem problem, can you go back a sec?
Yeah.
So I had a similar problem in doing that 3-tier stand. There was always going to be some kind of cruft at that center point near the threads.
Right.
A cove makes everything hideable.
Okay. Yeah.
So even if it weren't a perfect fit, if it was a cove in,
you
could have captured all the flaws and hidden them.
In there. Good idea. Good idea, Norm.
That's what I was saying, Bob. Yeah. If that thing just sat down in there, I think it would probably look better. But
yeah, it would have been nothing to just turn a little cove in there. So yes, that's a good one. I'll have to try that again.
It moves the problem from the Banksia into the stem too.
Yes, that's true. Go one more slide, Steve. This was a redo. I don't know whether anybody remembered, but I tried to do a bowl in a bowl. I think it was last summer or something like that, and it didn't work out. In fact, I think Mr. Duxbury said something. If I could get that bowl skewed a little bit off center and on the inner bowl, it would make it a lot more interesting. And I agree with that. I haven't tried it. But as I started playing around with this thing, I had that thing, the edge of the inside bowl turned so high, I couldn't stand it. I kept looking at, trying to figure out what I was going to do. And I just came up with the idea of making that edge, lowering it and making it get scalloped, and that was the result on that. So that's kind of a redo. One of those things you sit aside in your shop and look at it every day and try to figure out what to do with it. And then all of a sudden,
a great rescue.
Yeah, huge improvement.
Very pretty.
Come over to my shop. I got about 80 pieces like that.
I hate throwing stuff out.
It'll come to you someday. You constantly come to you someday.
It does. I got several other pieces sitting out there. Some of them been there a year or more.
No, that's nicely done, Bob. That actually big difference. And I love the texturing on this. It almost looks like something that just cracked. You know, just
Yeah.
just it got dry and it just like a and just it's actually like mud when it dries out, a puddle or something like that when it dries out, and clay.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah. that-
It almost looks prehistoric.
That's
Yeah, looks that's
all right.
a very nice effect.
Good, thank you.
All right, Reed.
The point that I like to leave here is just I hate to waste wood. And so I had some friends do a new kitchen. And this is from the doors, raised panel doors that were oak originally. And then they spray painted them white. Beautiful kitchen, but they were just going to throw them away. So this is the outer shell of the doors, the frame, and then the base down there is a glue up, which you would see better on the next picture. That is the center panel of one of the doors. And got a new lathe, so I'm able to do a 11.5 up to my new lathe is 14 inches. So this is about 13-inch bowl. So it's just some beautiful oak that somebody was going to throw in the trash can.
Nice, nice figure. Nice tight joints on your segments.
Thank you. Got a lot of pretty grain to it.
Yep.
Don't let Norm speak. He's going to contaminate all of us with his background.
I'm waiting for you guys to notice. That's not a stock photo either. I just had an orange.
I
Oh,
like the
God.
too.
Nicely done, Reed. What's the finish on that?
It's wipe on polyurethane min wax, probably about 4 or 5 coats.
Okay. That's nice. All right, Miss Rita, you there?
Oh, Rita's on another Zoom meeting
All right.
with Global Estates, the homeowners. She got this tree from, when Rita hears a chainsaw, she's off. And she got this tree from down the park. It had to be taken down. It's a maple. And she got a lot of compliments on her texturing. So she's been doing this. It's amazing how fast she does it. I don't know. She uses a micromotor and some little cutters, mostly stuff from the Dremel tool, I think. But she's getting pretty good at it. Yeah.
Do they go all the way through, or is it? Those aren't through cuts, right? I mean, the bottom is smooth. I guess I can answer my own question. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. No, that's
It's kind of undercut. The lip is pretty flat, and it's kind of undercut.
Looks like she's followed it with a burner too.
No, she doesn't do anything with a burner. It's
No?
it's all that thing's going at such high speed.
It burns
the Dremel tool. It burns it.
just using dull cutters, and that you get that.
Yeah, I have a lot of those.
That's nice. It's nicely done. Did she? So she turns it as well.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
That's nice.
Beautiful.
That's nicely done.
She's got all her own tools and her own lathe and her own everything, and you just stay out of there because all kind of trouble.
Next time, get her to turn the wheels for the cart for you.
Yeah, you got it.
All right, Tom.
So, yeah, this is a walnut table. the challenge on this one is to come up with a design for the legs. I went through about 6 different designs before I found something that I liked a lot. It's got that cove detail at the top, and it's a gentle taper. But I think the square is like 1 3/8 inch square, and then it tapers on the circle is just slightly smaller than that, tapers down to 3/4 of an inch at the bottom. And then of course I had to make 4 that looked the same. So that was the real challenge, was
Yeah.
I needed 4 identical pieces, and I got really close. I came up with a decent process to do that. So I can imagine the tapers aren't quite the same, but you can't notice it. Yeah, there's a better one. And the other trick was when you transition from square to round, you really have to, it took a bit of time for me practicing to make sure I don't chip out the square in the corner there.
The pommel.
I've worked on that for a while just to perfect how to do that without screwing up the square edges, and they came out pretty good. This walnut was probably harvested here in North Carolina about 30 years ago, and I acquired it about 5 years ago. I got about 500 board feet of the walnut, and this almost all of this table was taken out of a piece of a big chunk of walnut that was 16/4, and I have this massive piece, and I just cut out all my pieces and put it into the table. The reason for the table is it's only a 12-inch wide by 20-inch long top on it, but that was built that way to fit a particular spot next to a chair in my living room that has very limited space. And then of course, the real challenge on this was that I had to finish it. And I went through a process that I use in the shop. I have an abrasive paste that I use when I'm doing stuff on the lathe, and I follow that with an equivalent to an OB shine juice. And I did that to all the round pieces, but I needed everything to match. So I had to figure out how to do that same process to all the flat pieces. So I ended up with my orbital disc sander with a buffer on it to buff out all of and do the same exact process that I do on the lathe to do to the flat. I finished everything before I assembled it. And then I put it all together. And after it was together, it had 4 coats of lacquer with very minimal orange peel.
I can't remember who it was, but some professional turner said the secret to the pommel cut, which is that square to curve, is really sharp, really fast.
Very, very sharp tools it's absolutely. And and I tried different tools too. So it's from mostly, most of that I used with my spindle gouge, and but I have I just tried different methods, and I found something that worked for me. So I said, okay, all I got to do is repeat this 4 times. I cut 6 legs, and I didn't have to use the other 2.
I bet Terry could give us some advice on that.
That's exactly what I was going to say.
Yeah,
Terry will probably
really.
use a skew, right?
Alan.
I actually did use a skew as one of the methods that I tried, but I'm not very good with the skew. So I do some work with it, but it actually worked pretty good when I was cutting from square to round.
Alan Batty there's a YouTube video, and he shows how to do those. And he uses a skew to make the the cut essentially, so it's clean, and then uses a spindle gouge, you know, to do the cove.
I
down in
think
there.
Terry's going to enlighten us. He turned his mic on.
Terry, give us words of wisdom.
What I was going to say is when you come up with a new design, take some wood that you're not going to keep. And that first piece is for the fireplace, because once you've worked through your motor muscle experience, the second, third, fourth are going to come out completely different from the first one.
I,
First one works out what you want, and then go from there.
I actually did 3 full-scale practice pieces, and I did one piece that I did that top element 3 times in one long spindle. So I've had a lot of practice ahead of time, just partly to come up with the design that I like to look of, and partly to practice the different aspects of cutting it. So I would get the actual pieces. You know, I've got a lot of the walnut, but it is kind of precious. So I didn't want to hit that first. But you're right, practice, practice, practice.
Another thing that's very helpful, if you're turning a dark wood, put a white background so that you can see the ghost much more easily. If it's a light wood, put a dark background. I've got a board I just turned over from dark to light.
I know that, and I've heard that before, and of course I didn't think of it at the time.
Terry, would you cut those pommels with a skew? Is that how you would do it?
No, these are concave. When Alan was showing, his were convex. These would be with a gouge.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you see the curvature, the curved portion where it changes from the square to the cove.
Right.
Once you've cut your first one and come up with a design you like, then you can wrap tape on this and pencil that profile on there. It makes it a whole lot easier to see where your cuts are when you're cutting up to your pencil line.
Yeah, I had lots of pencil lines marking things on these, and you know I have actually removed them. I got them all off, thank goodness. And the joinery though on the table, you of course can't see it, but it's all mortise and tendon joinery. And this was kind of a weekend project, probably 3 or 4, probably. Well, a couple of days, so 3 days trying to figure out the leg design, but the actual project went together real quick.
Your weekends are a lot longer than mine.
Yeah. That'd be a weekend
Yeah,
every way.
I've built a lot of furniture way before I did any wood turning. Most of the furniture in my house is stuff I've made.
I think it's a really nice job, Tom, but,
Yeah.
and then the pommels are great. I use a 3/8 spindle gouge, but one of the hardest things I've ever had to do, I think, I made a pair of tables, and that long taper, nobody realizes what it takes to do a long taper until you've done 4 that match.
Yeah, that was a real challenge.
If you put a detail in the middle, you break it up and it takes your eye, but when you do a long taper and get 4 that match the same taper, you did a really nice job on that.
I learned there's a secret to that. You make the table bigger so the legs are so far apart no one can tell.
That's right. That's right.
Even with this table this size, the fact that they're not real close together is a help. But in reality, my legs, I had them at one point laid all together, and they were pretty close.
Yep.
You know, if you put a micrometer, you know what? Yeah, the one thing you don't do is put a micrometer on it.
You'll cry.
But
You'll end up with toothpicks trying to get them all to match.
But I ended up really pleased with the way it came out, and it was a fun little project and a little something different because over this last year I haven't really done any furniture because anytime I do furniture, I either have to give it away or find a place in my house to put it. So I don't have much places to put furniture.
Yeah, yeah, that's nicely
Can
done.
I ask if you'd considered using a template or something to match up the shape of the cove or anything like that?
I did a basic template for these legs so that I had all of my measurements and position set and the diameter set, so that, and then I had the marking gauges where at key points like the base, I sized that first. I sized at the largest point of the round section there. I sized that first, and then I worked the taper in from one end to the other. So I took a lot of care in doing that just to try to see if I could be consistent, because I knew, like I say, anybody can make a leg. It's making four that are the same as that's the challenge.
Right.
That's one reason. If I had to make multiple things, I tend to do that. But the other thing I was going to say is that for short tapers, like if you're making short legs or something like that, I found a really neat way to make a short taper is to take the longest tool rest that you have and set it to the angle that matches what you want. And then you just run your finger right down it, and it's hard to get a mismatch. So, for sure, that could work really well.
Yeah, of course, my longest tool rack tool is 12 inches, so that I definitely had to move it.
Oh, no, I understand that.
But it is, but
let's move on, guys. I think we need to.
Okay.
Okay. Is Richard Cook back on yet? No, I don't even see him on here now. All right. Okay. All right. Okay. The last two are mine. Somebody was talking about, just getting wood out of your, scrap box here. I years ago, I rough turned a whole bunch of bowls, and they've been sitting on this rack dry, and I tend to just leave them there because I don't really do much with just plain bowls anymore. But I actually had moved this one over to my burn box, and so it was roughed out, and so I'll just pull. I just was looking for something to do one day. So anyway, I pulled it out, turned it relatively thin, and just scalped the edge just to play with it, and then I didn't really like the way it worked, so I burned the top edge with just my wood burner with one of those spiral tips that you make the basket pattern with, and it's about 9 inches in diameter, and it was more practice than anything, but just playing with different shapes, see whether I could get it somewhat symmetrical. So I did this with I used the indexing wheel to lay out the high points and low points, just freehanded the peaks and valleys in between it, and then I cut it with a that $10 pneumatic reciprocating saw that you can get at Harbor Freight, and just put a little saber saw blade in it and just cut it with that and sanded it. So just fun. I don't know what I'll just playing with it, and it's finished with seal cell. Let's see, and then so my wife and I got we actually got some adult furniture in the house. We actually had a dining room table custom made for us. First, and might be the first piece of real furniture we ever bought like that. But anyway, we just wanted to protect it. So I made a set of coasters for Christmas, and this was made. These are all big leaf maple burl out of my scrap box, and the base is just a piece of burl also out of the scrap box. The discs are about 4.5 inches in diameter, and they have I used just that cell stick foam that you get at Michael's on the bottom of them, just so they don't slide across the table. It tends to, plus you don't have to finish the bottom. So anyway, just something fun. And when you have to make 10 things that are all the same, it's nice when they're all just flat round discs. So it does make it easier.
How did you locate the holes in that burl to get all 5 dowels straight up?
Well, I did one And then I cut a disc out that was that shape, and I had to get points in there that I could. The reason I had to use 5 dowels was there were some areas where I just couldn't drill into. So I first had 4 in there, but they slid out in that one that's in the front left there wasn't there, and or the one front right, sorry. And so I had to put an extra one in just to keep them in there. But yeah, it was tricky because I had to get what I did on the drill press. I just kind of put my template disc in there, and then just put it on the drill press and drilled a small pilot hole, and then used a brad point bit so it kind of centered on that. And they're just they're in there.
The coasters are turned.
Yep.
And how did you hold them?
I used my vacuum chuck.
Oh.
And so they were, yeah. So I rough cut them on the bandsaw, stuck them a little bit oversized, just put them on the. I turned one side, just hold them in a chuck, and then I turned them around and put them on the vacuum chuck to finish them. But I just, oddly enough, I mean, this took this really didn't take much time at all. It took me more time to drill those 5 dowels in the piece of burl than it did to turn the other 10. So, but no, it's just a fun thing, and to do. And again, I had a bunch of this burl of different depths, and I just used my bandsaw to cut it all down to 1/4 inch or about 3/8 thickness, and then I finished it on the lathe. I did stabilize these in the vacuum chamber with cactus juice in order to just make it so if they got wet, they're protected and there's no finish on them. They're just buffed.
I was going to ask you that because they're too nice to set something wet on.
Yeah, no, they're stabilized, Jim. So yeah, they're nothing's gonna get through that. Once you stabilize them with cactus juice, they're not affected by moisture at all. I mean, I wet sand my acrylic pieces that have stabilized burl next to them, and they're essentially saturated. So it works out pretty well. So that's all the pieces. We do have one new member tonight. Michael Wicks, are you there? Are you here?
I am.
Do you want to just give a quick introduction to yourself? Not to put you on the spot, but just.
I warned him.
Okay.
Yeah, no worries.
Okay.
Sure thing. Well, hey, appreciate letting me join here, and great to see all the amazing work you guys have done. So I moved to Raleigh about 3 years ago, and I got into wood turning a while back when I was actually back in high school and college. My grandfather ran a cabinet making business in San Diego years ago, and got into it, but then I've been moving around a fair amount and did not have a lathe and wood shop, and so finally I'm back and got a little bit more settled, and finally pulled the trigger and got a lathe, and so I'm looking forward to getting back into it, and I figured it would be good to keep learning because there's still a lot more I need to learn. So appreciate you letting me join and kind of learn from some of you that have been doing this a little bit longer than I have. So anyway, looking forward to it.
Well, welcome. Just a real quick. I mean, we used to just have when we had live meetings, we would have a gallery where people could come bring just pieces in, but it was about 10 minutes. All we had was to go through all the pieces. So it really wasn't much detail. We started this show and tell meeting when we started doing online meetings, and it's something we're probably going to continue on after we even go back to live meetings, because it just gives everybody a chance. As you can see, we spend about 90 minutes just talking about their work, and people can ask questions, and it's kind of a relaxed, as you can see by the orange peel discussion tonight. We usually end up on some theme like that in each meeting. So, but welcome. We're glad you're here, and feel free to reach out to any of us if you have any questions.
Join up. It's a great group.
All right. With that, let's Norm, you want to do the raffle? I will stop sharing my screen if I can get to it.
Hey, this is Terry.
Yeah.
I want to address a little bit on the spray gun.
Okay.
You know, if you spray too much, it's a problem to get rid of. But if you just spray lightly, it's not so bad. So if you start with the spray gun too far away so that you get overspray and powder, then move up to it until it's where you want. I used to paint the camouflage Army vehicles, and the guy that taught me this showed me, and it really made a lot of sense. So it works for furniture too.
Well, good. Thanks,
Awesome,
Terry.
thank you.
Good, thanks, Jerry.
Yeah.
And Terry, I hope you keep joining us on these meetings here. It's good to hear from you again. I'm glad you joined. And
I'm glad I could make it, but I got things going on with my mother and rehab and everything else. And
right.
so,
Okay.
and then
Well,
I'm supposed to be retired, but the people keep bringing work.
well, I just want to let you know it's fun to have you on because we can.
Thanks.
There's times where we can just ask you questions because we know you'll know the answers. So, but no, and Craig, it's good to see you again too. I'm glad you joined. So hopefully we can keep doing this. So whenever you can.